When I was a kid, maybe around 9 or 10 years old, I was engrossed in political bubbles. My parents are very political immigrants who love keeping their kids sort of in the know, though of course it was biased and I was mostly watching conservative media. I also was friends with people who are more liberal, which allowed me to open up and pop my bubbles and experience the world through different lenses. When I was younger though, I really looked at the 1970s and the civil rights movement as sort of this great time in history that probably wouldn't happen again. Except now, as an adult, I realize that we're always living history. And so there are moments in which life feels so calm that it almost feels like nothing's happening in quotation marks. But in moments like this, it feels like everything's happening and the world is crashing down around us. But once again, we are just simply living history. So how do we as queer people, marginalized communities, disabled communities, neurodivergent communities, how do we remain stoic, positive, optimistic, compassionate when the world feels like it's coming down on us? When I was little and I thought I missed out on being on the right side of history, or I missed out being able to be a part of history, I realized that it was sort of a blessing in disguise. Just my little bubble was feeling pretty safe and there was nothing really controversial happening until I got older, graduated high school, and 2008 happened. When Prop 8 happened in California, it was my opportunity as a closeted queer person to advocate for queer communities, even though I wasn't out myself. Those times were very tense and very controversial in my household. My parents were very confused and concerned that their kids were queer. Spoiler, 3 of us came out eventually, but they were looking at me and wondering, is this daughter of ours, this very Republican and conservative, outspoken daughter of ours, actually secretly in the closet? And when they asked me, I denied it. Only to come out later, a few years later, I came out and officially said, actually, I am gay. And I think that's important that you should know that. Now, all of these years later, my parents are still staunch Republicans. Yes, they voted for Trump. And yes, they're anti-LGBTQIA rights, and they are religious. So it's been tense. Even though it's been tense, and even though my parents are immigrants who fled a country that they felt persecuted in for a better country, their kids now are a version of what they were then, persecuted minority who's being targeted by the majority, ironically enough, our own parents. So how do we as marginalized communities remain compassionate, loving, and all of the good things? Well, I think we have to remind ourselves to be that. But more than that, we have to remind ourselves that for a lot of us, we're the adults in the room now. For a lot of millennials, myself included, and maybe some young Gen Z or old Gen Zers, maybe we are now the adults. Kids are looking to us to remain joyful and stoic. They're looking at us to remain focused and to offer them hope for the future. And I think that's really, really important. Just like when I was a young queer kid and I was reading gay books and watching gay people on TV and watching Rosie and Ellen get rejected from the mainstream, when I was watching people stand up for themselves, it kept me hopeful. I want to also be that for future generations. And I think we should all be that for future generations. Can't give up because it's getting hard.
You've been together since 73?
13 years. 1374.
Listen to this. They're suing the New York City Board of Education for $1 million clams. Ruth works for the Board of Education.
Yes.
True? City of New York.
I'm a guidance counselor at Sheepshead Bay High School.
If you work for the Board of Education, your husband gets medical and dental?
Yep.
And they're not giving it to him.
They're not married.
I cannot get married. This society, this state, will not accept my going through a ceremony with Ruth.
Do you think there should be such a thing as a gay month?
We have it here, too.
What do you think?
I think it's caused a lot of hatred. I think it's caused a lot of resentment.
You mean the publicity about it?
Absolutely.
So if you're gay, just kind of, don't be so, you know.
Don't.
It's the prancing around makes you angry.
I want a white woman German month club or something like that, you know?
Again, we are forced to literally say, we're here and we are standing tall and you better recognize us.
If this were done in Philadelphia, it would cost tax dollars. My taxes should not be spent.
What would cost tax dollars?
How about the Mummers Parade? Does that cost you money?
No, that's an independent thing.
You don't have to pay for the cleanup or the municipal...
Sure, but we all love it.
Why would the gay... Wait, So you want parades for what you love. You really are manifesting a prejudice against these people. You are telling them to shut up. Now this, yes, you are.
Nobody's going to shut me up because silence equals death.
I just think
You better go on and find out why I upset you so much because I make love to her.
We feel live and let live. That's fine. My question is...
No, you don't think live and let live.
For the men.
The laws are against me. We can't get married. Don't say live and let live. I refuse to keep quiet.
I have 6 points that I want to share with you today that I think will help you through this administration and its time in the White House, even if it goes, universe forbid, over the 4 years that we expect. I want us to get ready and prepare and remain joyful even when life is hard, regardless of what's happening around us. You know, no matter where you are on the planet, someone is facing tragedy. And just because it's not happening where you are doesn't mean other people aren't suffering. And so it's always an opportunity for us to remain in our joy, regardless of how the world is sort of melting down around us, and to keep our hearts and minds and thoughts with people who are suffering around the world, even when we're not.
I am not a victim, and I refuse to be a victim in this circumstance. None of this should be surprising to us. This is what the conservative movement has wanted to do in this country for decades. We must not catastrophize. We must remember we've been here before. As trans people, our identities have been criminalized, and we found ways to have community, to have joy, and to be ourselves. They told us they were going to do this. They're doing it, and accept that. And now what? And the now what for me are all my girlfriends. We hang out and we have community and we support each other and we lift each other up. And that's what queer and trans people have been doing since we've existed. And that, in the face of this catastrophe, even as they pass law, and we can't do anything about the laws. They don't listen to the people anyway, but we can love each other. We can form communities. We can make those communities bigger and stronger and even more fortified. Maybe we can even get together a cohesive strategy to fight this stuff. It is what it is. It's happening. Now what? I refuse to be a victim. We must refuse to be victimized.
I think what's important is that we don't give up and we focus on things like community.
It feels like a lot of opponents of Trump and what he stands for are just calmly bracing themselves for the next 4 years. They're not producing the same outrage cycle that I know existed back in 2016. It almost feels like apathy, and that's not good, but there maybe is a positive byproduct. To be clear, we don't need actual apathy. I want to make sure people understand that apathy and doomerism is not useful. Someone recently said, shout out to wherever you are. I'm sorry, I can't remember where I got this from. I watch a lot of YouTube and talk to a lot of people. Doomerism is just giving yourself permission to give up. That's what it is. And we don't need that. That's not helpful. That's not useful. People that are most prone to doomerism are often people that will survive the situation regardless of what happens. And that is not being a true ally to those out there that are going to be most affected by what's happening. So we don't need doomerism. But what we need is to channel the energy that you would put into performative activism and protest marches and mean comments and Twitter fights into local community engagement, political education, and organizing. That's what we need going forward. Just want to make that clear. But I do think that starving this particular population of fans' attention and fuel is a good thing. So much of what the right has built their current media and political strategy on is transmuting our attention and anger towards them into motivation for their base. Shout out to my favorite moderate, suddenly leaning a little bit more left, brother Kamal. He said something on the stream last night where basically he's realizing that conservatives only care about the fact that the left is cringe. They're not even engaging with the reality of what conservatism and the right wing is doing. They just care about addressing the cringe. This is not a logical or like high-minded analysis from them, but it does speak to something about the fact that they don't actually care about the politics or reality of the situation here. They just want our attention and energy. And if we starve them of that, we're doing something to starve them of momentum. And I think I recognize this, and this is one of the reasons why I'm not going to be doing much Trump content going forward. Not just for my own mental health, which obviously I care about, but because there will be enough attention given to him by other creators, by the actual news cycle. They will report on his activities, and thus I don't think a lot of extra content is necessary. I don't plan on being a part of that ecosystem. I think the fewer people that are, the better. I have one more video related to Trump plan as I reevaluate my post-election take for a couple of reasons, but after that, that's kind of it. And I hope more people do the same. Literally don't feed the trolls by tracking his every move and complaining about it online. Channel that energy into work. Organize can start simply in creating a group chat amongst peers and neighbors to do whatever you all need to get done to survive the situation. I know not everyone is in an area with organizations, but you can still identify ones that you're not connected with and send them a few dollars or coordinate resources or just join a mailing list. Anything is better than doom scrolling and leaving mean comments about how you can't believe he said or did insert thing he's saying or doing now.
I want you to focus on the future self, right? Goals matter more than ever.
You should not save money. So you should just divest, quote unquote, in whatever vague way that means. The practical outcome of that is leaving people, individuals, usually people who are not very wealthy to begin with, in a much worse financial situation. And one thing I feel like we cannot say enough on this channel as people who do advocate for financial solvency and literacy and stability is keeping yourself broke or financially unstable, if you have the option to make yourself financially stable, literally does A, nothing to help you, and B, nothing to help any of the social or political causes you care about, because 9 times out of 10, being in financial chaos leaves you with the ability to do literally nothing except survive day to day. And I think we don't understand that when we talk about something like retirement, for example, what it means to not be in financial chaos for the average person is hundreds of thousands, if not well over $1 million saved. Because whether it is through the inability to work physically or just the desire to not work, even a decade or so of living without any other income, that requires a lot of money. Social Security already doesn't cover it. That problem is going to get way worse by the time my generation is approaching retirement. So if we do not take our financial situation seriously, we are essentially guaranteeing ourselves that either now or at some point in our life, we will have the ability to focus on nothing but survival, which is, by the way, a very, very intentional dynamic. When we talk about the war on the poor, for example, it's so important to remind ourselves that keeping people disenfranchised and disorganized is the exact strategy taken by the capital-wielding class to keep the labor force cheap. A group of people who have no time or ability to focus on anything but their own survival, who are having to work multiple jobs just to get by every day, they don't have time to organize. They don't have time to advocate for themselves. They don't have time to contribute to their own communities or to broader political causes. They also don't have the leverage to look for other better compensated jobs. So keeping people poor and desperate only plays into the dynamic that we're already seeing.
I want you to come to conclusions with good data, and that data is going to matter more than ever.
In 1995, over 11 million children died before the age of 5. Last year, fewer than 5 million children died before the age of 5. Since I graduated from high school, overall global child mortality has fallen by well over 50%. Now, it's still far too high. We could reduce it by another 50% with existing technology if we really wanted to. That's actually one of the most discouraging facts I know, is that we could choose to live in a much better world than we're currently choosing, but this is not about being discouraged. Anyway, this progress, which I will argue was not natural or normal or inevitable, represents, I think, the greatest success in human history. We can also understand this as the likelihood of a child dying. In 1800, in the United States, about 46% of all people born died before the age of 5. That's similar to what the rate had been 500 or 5,000 or 50,000 years earlier. 40 years later, by 1840, it had only gone down to 43%. Extremely slow progress. Progress continued throughout the 19th century, albeit slowly thanks to better sanitation, emerging understanding of the germ theory of disease, and so on. But then, in the 20th century, things changed dramatically. In the 40 years between 1920 and 1960, your chances of dying under the age of 5 went from 18% to 3%. And a lot of things had to go right for that to happen. Better pharmaceutical interventions like insulin and antibiotics, safer surgery, lower rates of absolute poverty and malnutrition, lower rates of tuberculosis. This progress we've had is not inevitable. It is the result of sustained, ongoing, open-ended funding and collaboration. I really hope that in 30 years I'm able to say that the most encouraging fact I know is that we continued to reduce child mortality throughout my entire lifetime. Continued progress for human health is not natural. It will result or fail to result from human choices.
We need to remember also, especially as queer communities, we've been here before and we'll be here again, but we are ready to take a stand and to be more vocal about our representation, about our rights. I think Laverne Cox said it really well. I think other people have said it really well. This isn't the first time and it won't be the last. I think people forget and probably take for granted that, things like the atheist movement was something that was very controversial in my time growing up. And now we kind of take for granted the fact that we live amongst each other with the religious and the non-religious.
My next guest for the last portion of our show tonight is going to be Madalyn Murray O'Hair. She is a famous, and some people say infamous woman. It's always easy to appear on a television show and express popular views that the audience seems to go along with, but very often when somebody holds certain beliefs or views that the majority of the population does not think popular, it's kind of easy to turn. So she is here really to do two things: talk about her position, also to answer a certain charge that Reverend Billy Graham made on the show several weeks ago. Mrs. O'Hair is the self-admitted atheist who brought about the U.S. Supreme Court ban on prayers in public schools in 1963. And would you welcome her, please, Madalyn Murray O'Hair.
The actual transcript that I wanted to reply to was this. Carson said to Billy Graham, "Have you ever had any correspondence at all with Madalyn Murray on any kind of talk show or such?" And Graham said, "No, I never have." And at which point he was interrupted by Graham, who said, "She wrote me a letter once, and it was, she used so many four-letter words, and a couple of them I have never heard, and I thought I had heard most of them. I am here tonight in the defense of the four-letter word, and I would not use four-letter words in a letter to Billy Graham, simply because my political acumen and my business acumen would preclude me from doing any such thing. There is no such letter. And the only thing that I have to say to Billy Graham tonight is something from the Bible, naturally. Deuteronomy 5:16. Dear Billy Graham, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. I use four-letter words exquisitely, delightfully, deliberately, and abundantly whenever they need to be used, and I very rarely scatter these pearls before swine. I use these speeches at colleges and universities, and I'm generally paid, up to $3,000 to go into the colleges and swear. This is because we take seriously separation of church and state, and the whole issue of obscenity has to do with separation of church and state. I simply am not going to let the church tell me, not alone what to wear. I'm not going to permit the church to tell me what I'm going to eat, fish on a certain day, for instance, for a long while. I'm not going to permit the church to tell me how many children I'm going to have, and I'm not going to let the church take certain words, which are vital, and charge them, put a charge on them, that those words really do not have.
And right now, the religious communities, though no hate like a Christian's love, you know what I mean? There is a battle happening for legal representation, God outside of government, but more than that, our understanding of how wonderful it's kind of been for a little while, where we could feel comfortable and almost like taking a breath in our representation, only to remember that not to take it for granted, because the majority is still very, in my opinion, patriarchal, misogynistic, and religious and bigoted. It's not because I think all religious people are bigoted. I just think that sometimes the books that they read and worship, the ones written by men, they're for men and by men, and they're not really considering any of us. And so the detriment of their own communities will also be people in those communities. Religious communities have queer people. Religious communities have women and femme people and AFAB people. So realistically, like, it's not just queer people that are going to be targeted. At the end of the day, it's also going to be AFAB people. And it's going to be people that forget that these rights that they have right now didn't come, easily. They came at a cost. And so once again, we have to remind ourselves of that cost.
The decision to have a child should not be a matter to be decided by the male-dominated legislature.
The 1960s and 70s ushered in big changes for women in America. From family life to the workplace to reproductive rights, there was a charge for change, known as the women's rights movement. But long before then came the fight for women's suffrage, which granted American women the right to vote in 1919. That movement, led by Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, paved the way for the second wave of feminism in the 60s and 70s. In 1960, family planning was transformed as the FDA approved birth control pills for contraceptive use, opening a new chapter for the career women. About 3 years later, at the urging of Esther Peterson, President John F. Kennedy signed the Equal Pay Act. Also that year, Betty Friedan published The Feminine Mystique, which documented what she saw as the oppression of middle-class women.
We're all housewives when in the beginning and in the end, although we have to be much more than that in the world now.
And we have to give ourselves an opportunity to be a part of that living history and to be the group of people that from 30 years from now, people look back and say, like, they really did it. The same way I look back and I say, wow, they really did it. They really stood up for themselves. They really made it clear with love and compassion that they're not going to be silenced. I really don't want this frat boy attitude we've been seeing to turn us into ugly people.
Even you, but you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless. God bless. You will not have war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. You have to be thankful. You don't have the cards. Situation. What was your second question?
My second question for President Zelensky. No. Why don't you wear a suit? Why don't you wear a suit? You're the highest level in this country's office, and you refuse to wear a suit.
And so I want to encourage us to remain joyful and lovely in the sight of something so ugly. And there really is an ugliness to bigotry that I think all of us are very exhausted by and sick of and afraid of. But I want to remind us not to move in fear, because fear is the root of all evil. In a philosophical sense, like, fear is that thing that keeps you stagnant, is that thing that keeps you from speaking up and speaking your truth, and it allows bullies to keep you cornered. Here are the 6 tools that I want us to focus on in order to survive and thrive through this administration. We need to focus on our loved ones. We need to remind ourselves to be compassionate and loving and community focused. We need to remind ourselves to be loving and compassionate to ourselves. We need to refocus our attention to the people that we love, to the place that we love, to the community that we love. It's going to be very easy to become bitter. It's going to become very easy to ignore our loved ones, but we have to remain loving and compassionate and joyful through this time by committing to that with others. No matter what happens, no matter how ugly they get, to remind ourselves that we don't need to be ugly in turn, that we need to remain hopeful and resilient no matter how ugly it gets. And to remember that kids are watching us, like young people are watching us, and they're thinking, well, if the 30-year-olds and the 40-year-olds and the 50-year-olds and the 60-year-olds are losing hope, what hope do I have? You have so much. And I don't want those young kids to look at us and think, well, they're giving up, I guess I should give up. No one's giving up. We're moving forward. Okay, we take 3 steps forward and 2 steps back. And even though we're in the 2 steps back, I really want you to stick around for the 3 steps forward. Number 2 is going to be a little bit harder because I'm going to ask you to live your life. Live your life like, quote, normal, even though it's not normal. Live your life, go to work, focus on your community, wake up, exercise, eat well, save your money, focus on that future that you were hoping for before all of this happened.
Now, I do want to be clear that this sort of question framing of, why should I bother doing anything financial if the world is just chaos and or going to be even more so, is a question that we have received pretty much since we started this channel. And that is just another reminder that all of this does not start and end with Trump. And both the sort of existential dread and the ethical complications of participating in our financial system is not new, was an issue under Biden, would have been an issue under Harris.
And focus on it seriously with intention. I think my life personally has gotten better, that I have focused now on the future and remained in the present as much as possible to be grateful for where I'm at, to be hopeful for where I can be. But remember that, no matter where you are in living history, there are always people who, we're going to be alive after it, and we're going to have to be prepared for that. It's not going to end with us. The world's not going to end. It's going to continue. And there's going to be a future in 50 years to 100 years, and we should be prepared for that. 3, your mental health matters. Your mental health is everything health. It's going to impact your body, your ability to work, your ability to commune. It's going to impact everything. If you can't afford a therapist, which is so understandable, or you can afford a therapist, but there's not very many available, don't be afraid to read a book or listen to a podcast or watch mental health professionals on YouTube. As much as it seems like a cope, and it might be temporary, it isn't a replacement for therapy, but it sure helps you not feel alone, because you're not alone. So there are so many different content creators. I'll even list a few in my description of favorite people who are educated in mental health, who I do think are giving people opportunities to remember that there is hope, there is a future to invest in, and that you're not alone. So don't forget to take care of your mental health. 4, physical health. Your body is everything. You need to sleep. You need to rest. And I know in this time where time is literally limited, it's hard to even justify sleeping, but sleeping isn't just about the now, it's about your future. And so as much as it's a struggle, especially for those of us who have trouble sleeping, we have nightmares, we have PTSD, we're ADHD, we have insomnia, it can be so difficult to find that time to sleep. And sometimes if you're like me, you're up all night thinking, you don't have time to sleep, you have to make money, you don't have time to sleep, you have to work, you don't have time to sleep, you don't even get to sleep. And then I have to remind myself to sleep. So I have a sleep app on my phone. It kind of helps me keep track of how many hours I'm getting. I have fibromyalgia, so I try to sleep at least 9 to 10 hours. I notice that if I sleep 8 hours, I'm just a mess because of my illness. But if I can get in that 10 hours, that 9 to 10 hours, I am so much better. I just feel so much better. And so I want to encourage you to take that rest, even though I know from personal experience how hard it is. It will make a difference. You'll show up to work better. You'll show up for your community better. You'll show up for yourself better. 5, since time is of essence and time is a big problem, how do we make time? This is something I've used in my own life. It may help you. It may not. I look for time the way I look for, deals at grocery stores. I look at my schedule and I think, how can I get an extra 30 minutes here, an extra 10 minutes here, and I try to really figure that out. It's really hard. I sleep for 10 hours and then I'm 2 hours to wake up and 2 hours to go to bed, which leaves me so many hours to work and so many hours to socialize and see my partner and call my friends. And so sometimes I can feel so overwhelmed, like I'm running out of time. I'm never going to have the time. Someone stole my time. Who took my time away from me? Life takes time away from you, but time is also this illusion we're working with. This is going to sound really difficult, but I want you to take the time to find the time. And I want you to do it by practicing calmness. So this leads us into number 6. I want you to find 5 minutes a day to meditate. And I know that sounds so woo-woo for some people, but 5 minutes a day to meditate, that's it. Deep breaths, total silence. Just allow your body to sink. If you feel the weight in the world on your shoulders, let it sink you into the ground wherever you are and let it go. And I promise you 5 minutes is going to sound so long, but it is going to make a huge difference. If you can just put a little timer on, 5 minutes, close your eyes, deep breaths, you will gain minutes from this. 5 minutes of meditation will give you 10 minutes extra of energy, maybe even 30 minutes extra of energy you didn't have prior to meditating.
For thousands of years, people have practiced meditation for spiritual, emotional, and physical well-being. But from a scientific perspective, how exactly does meditating affect your body? Does it really do anything? It all starts in the brain. During meditation, brain scans see increased activity in regions directly correlated with decreased anxiety and depression, along with increased pain tolerance. The default mode network in particular is activated when one's mind is at rest and not focusing on the outside world, and has been found to improve memory, self-awareness, and goal setting. Want to be more caring to your friends and family? When scientists compared the brains of Buddhist monks to new meditators, they found the region of the brain associated with empathy to be much more pronounced in the monks. It also literally changes your brain waves, and we can measure these frequencies. Meditators have higher levels of alpha waves, which have been shown to reduce feelings of negative mood, tension, sadness, and anger.
Meditating has so many scientific benefits, but more than that, I promise you, just reminding yourself that you have free will and have control and you can do whatever you want in this moment, whatever you want, sounds sometimes like just breathing. This thing we do automatically without thinking, if you do it on purpose with intention and you pay attention to how amazing it kind of is, it will calm you down. And this is really difficult because I know right now you're thinking, I don't even have time to eat in the morning. I don't even have time to, see my kids. I don't even have time to do. I know. But I want you to practice getting that time back with 5 minutes of meditation. And if 5 minutes sounds like too much, I think that's an indication of where we all are. But if you keep running around like a chicken with its head cut off, we're never going to calm down. We need to be there for our community in a calm way, for ourselves in a calm way, for our life in a calm way. And if we're always feeling like that pressure, it's not going to be good for us. Now, listen, even with this 5 minutes of meditation, you're going to feel stressed. Even with this 5 minutes of meditation, it's going to feel like you're running around with your head chopped off. Even with this 5 minutes of meditation, you're going to have stressful days. Life is suffering, but it doesn't have to be unwise. And so what our focus is to suffer wisely through all of this time. Whether it's the next 4 years, 10 years, or 50, we have to suffer wisely by taking away all the ways we suffer unnecessarily. And I know it sounds silly and I know it sounds privileged because it is truly, a privilege to have the time. But I want you to give that time to yourself because I think you deserve it. You deserve the privilege of time. So let's work on just 5 minutes. And I promise you, I think it will change your life if you do it consistently for even a week. And then put in the comments section if you see a difference in your life. 5 minutes. No sounds, just breathing. It kind of helps if you have an open window and you can hear some birds, that kind of sounds good. It will make a difference. We cannot control the world. We can only control ourselves. I learned this in therapy because trust me, I was dying under the weight of my empathy for the world, my wanting to fix it and save it. I was being crushed. And when my therapist asked me, who told you were going to save the world? And I felt like the world had told me that. The world was blaming me. It was blaming my generation. It was blaming, it felt like it was blaming me at least. So I felt like I was responsible. But we're all responsible together. It's not just one or two of us. It's all of us. The world is a reflection of us as a whole. And as a whole, I don't want us to panic. I want us to remain steadfast in our compassion and our love for humanity and for every life on the planet, obviously, plant life and, everybody. I think everyone needs to reset how they really feel about life and reset it in a way that is positive and optimistic and compassionate. I think we're really missing those words right now. I've seen from a lot of people, and I know it's so hard to be a good person. That'll be next week's podcast, why it's so hard to be a good person. I've seen so many people lose their compassion and love and become ugly towards people who have regretted their vote, who have regretted and I understand why you're upset, but them regretting their vote is one step to us moving in the same direction. We have to be kind and compassionate and let people go on their journey at their pace and remain steadfast in our joy. And we're not going to do that if we become ugly because we're bitter and resentful of people's decisions. Be angry and compassionate at the same time. Be angry because of injustice and be compassionate even so. Compassion, by definition, means to suffer with. And remember that I used to be a Republican. That many, many, many years ago, I used to vote Republican. I only did it once. I voted for McCain and Palin. But that used to be me. And through compassion and love and education, I got out of that bubble. And now I'm here. It took a long time. It took my whole childhood for me to re-examine myself and come to a better version of myself. But it happened through compassion and love. Didn't happen through bitterness. And I want to offer that to everybody, but to remember that not everyone can meet everyone where they're at. So make sure you're compassionate and loving to all the people you can be to. And remember not to be ugly and bitter to those you can't. You can't say something nice, don't say it at all. But of course, if you need to vent, there are appropriate venues for that venting. I mean, I kind of do it on stream, maybe a little too much, but you will have your proper moment to vent. There's nothing wrong with feeling angry. But there is something wrong, I think, with becoming ugly because of that anger. If you're autistic and queer like I am, remember that the world doesn't necessarily get better at your pace, but you get better at a faster pace. As individuals, we can move a lot faster than the world, and as individuals, we can impact that world for the positive. So don't lose hope, because you do get better, even if the world feels like it's not getting better. Stay compassionate, stay hopeful. And since this is a philosophy channel, one of the greatest philosophers, Whitney Houston, once said, "I believe the children are our future. Teach them to love well and let them lead the way. Show them all the beauty they possess inside. Give them a sense of pride to make it easier. Let the children's laughter remind us of how we used to be. Learning to love yourself is the greatest love of all." All right, guys, I'll see you for the next one. Bye.
In my head, in real life I'm mad. My belly's being fed and I'm okay. I'm just fine, yet all I do is whine. Nothing in my life, cause I know I don't make sense. I've been nothing but blessed, so why's my life a mess? Please tell me, cause I'm sick of thinking. Yeah, I'm sick of reaching out for the truth and living life as a fool.